Hi, I'm Peter Buckle, and this is Design Office Hours, a podcast about design, designers, and careers in design. I talk about creating, leading, and navigating creative work at this place we call work. Whether you're a student, just starting out, or an established designer, working the craft, grinding the day, welcome to the podcast. This show is also about your input. Send in your topics and questions, how to get in touch with me on the show. Email designofficehours@peterbuckle.com and follow me on Instagram at designofficehours. Also, head over to peterbuckle.com/designofficehours. There you find my mailing list to sign up to get notified about new episodes on the show, as well as other knowledge goodies. Shout out here to the cheat sheets from season 1, 10 one-pagers, one for each episode from the previous season, with a condensed dose of knowledge to help you grow and become a better designer. All right, let's get into it. What do we have? I recently virtually sat down with my friend and Zoom buddy, Curtis Michelson. And Curtis is an innovation strategist and facilitator. He helps companies to change and unlock new waves of innovation, and we'll talk about this. And further, we talk about corporate innovation, the ins and outs, and eventually also difficulties in order to get there, and designing for change, and how AI and new tools together with design fiction can unlock new futures inside organizations. This sounds something that organizations would do anyway, right? They all call themselves innovative organizations, but well, truth has it, this is rather difficult. Getting to change, dealing with uncertainty, and there are good reasons why sometimes you need somebody from the outside who comes in and pulls the curtain back and facilitates a nice workshop, ideally over a long time. Few engagements that help you to see and reframe where you are as a company right now and what you should do next. So if you are working in or with a company, trying to figure out what's next, trying to unlock an innovation chapter, there is something in here for you. Right. All right, Curtis, welcome to Design Office Hours. I'm glad to have you. You are a guest that is in the innovation corner. Now, we all claim to be in the innovation corner, but you're truly in it. And I think before we dive into who you are and what you do, I tried to recap how we actually met. So fun fact for our listeners, we have not met in person, but it feels like we know each other since a while, which we do. Yeah. We met on you have to help me out here. We met on a future online meetup somehow. Do you remember what it was? It was
it might have been Julian Bleeker's community.
Julian Bleeker's community, exactly. The Future Institute, something like this.
Yeah. Institute, or something along those lines. Yeah.
Institute and Future always sounds great. And I remember we were on this. It was a meetup about speculative futures, and a topic I think we both love. And we both ended up in a Zoom breakout room, just the two of us. And we were tasked to sketch out verbally a future that I think sort of would unfold. And we both did. And I think we did this fabulously. We got along quite well. And we found ourselves just riffing off each other's. And I think, we imagined this sort of like, call it innovation Jedis of the future, people that go into companies and unlock tremendous values, being paid absurdly amounts of, I don't know if it's money. I don't know if it's money in the future, right? Might be not even gold anymore. And then also leave this. And I think, what struck me in hindsight when I look at this, on paper, hilarious hiring spree of Meta and its AI team, I thought of you and I was like, we weren't so wrong about this actually. It looked hilarious on paper, but I think it sort of resembled a little bit the future there. So anyway, this is how we got together the first time. That was about, I think,
Zoom besties really quick.
Exactly. So let's dive in. You're in the innovation corner. I mentioned that. Let's give our listeners, in your own words, a little bit of how did you get to where you are now? Brief recap. Sure. Call a memory lane if you want to.
Well, I wouldn't be in the innovation corner if I hadn't taken some twists and turns and some unique back alleys, right? So I'll try to keep.
I think that's mandatory.
Keep the journey somewhat brief. But I guess what I'm feeling these days, I've come full circle because my sort of professional life started in change, which was the environmental movement. I was literally knocking on doors trying to raise money and awareness and consciousness and pass some good environmental legislation in my home state of Florida. I was born and raised in Miami, and I was working with an organization that was started by Ralph Nader, if you remember that name. Big guy from the 70s, involved in lots of public interest projects. And so Florida Purg was my start. And that was powerful work, and it got me over my shyness. I was a shy philosophy nerd, got a degree in philosophy. You get enough doors slammed in your face, you get over shyness pretty quickly. And what I discovered was a little inner entrepreneur inside there, because I was really selling change.
Right.
And I started my first business in downtown Orlando in about the 90s, mid 90s, kind of a desktop publishing outfit. It was a perfect moment. The Mac, the PostScript printer, all that stuff hit the internet. And so my wife at the time and myself started a company. And I guess I learned really quickly. I kind of cut my teeth in business with that first adventure. Never made a lot of money, but man, I learned. I did my first disc, DISC, the personality profile, had all the staff use it. We were hosting lunch and learn events with a lot of change professionals, and I just got sort of begun to get indoctrinated or soaked into the language of business and change. And then I just rode the .com wave for about a decade or so. I just was building web apps and database driven applications, and I actually was with a really cool company that cared a lot about design, and we would teach kind of UX principles, right? So had a bit of a design picture there too. And then by 2010, really was feeling the call to get, I guess if you would say, closer to customers. I was already in any technical project, I was usually the dev that was the closest and usually taking in requirements and thinking about the business impact. So, I mean, I discovered that it was really like business analysis, something like that. And discovered the International Institute of Business Analysis, the IIBA, and quickly
great name.
found that tribe. So it's been a journey with different tribes. There was an Agile tribe in there too, discovering the Agile lean people.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, it was a pretty natural hop into innovation because, many of the projects I worked on were just scoping big, massive, ambitious sort of opportunities and crazy deadlines. And then I started to work more with corporates. And so I started to realize innovation was really where the decisions got made. I just kept moving towards where the funding decisions were getting made. That was the drive.
Right.
Who decided this was the product we were supposed to build? Oh,
Where's
that was those people over there. So I just felt like I finally come around to change, because the innovation work I do now is really working with organizations that are moving at the business model level, that are really thinking about their role in a ever evolving ecosystem that's, shifting sands under their feet. And they want to find some steady ground. And so, helping them develop innovation muscles and innovation capacity and those capabilities is really, I guess, the bulk of what I'm doing now. And of course, a lot of AI coming along for the ride is, we could talk about that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Every conversation here ends up, at some point about AI. It's interesting.
Wouldn't be a proper podcast.
Exactly. You mentioned already the .com, right, wave that you rode, and sort of, which was also, surely a big push in terms of innovation, and it kind of created the internet to some extent as we know it, or at least the baseline. But then it also led to huge disruption, because the .com bubble, being a bubble, it bursts. We may eventually head into a similar phenomenon here.
Correct.
But I wonder, you mentioned this sort of innovation capacity and muscle it has to build. Have you seen this, so having the .com as sort of a wave that, led to a lot of shifting sands for a lot of classic businesses? I think the pandemic eventually, in some extent, also sparked some of this. I always say some of the businesses wouldn't be here without the pandemic that sort of forced them to reinvent, right? And we have with AI something approaching that is even more monumental, I would say. Would you say there were like trends or times where yeah, I guess more companies then, had more shifting sands and you were more requested and sort of ups and downs in this capacity as a growing innovation muscles. Sometimes it's just,
Yeah, it is fun to compare now to then because you already point out the very similar macroeconomic factors. There's many parallels. The kind of circular investments that are getting made.
right,
So right now, OpenAI and NVIDIA are kind of buying each other's services, and there's this kind of circular funding cycle going on, and we're really building out infrastructure way ahead of when we're going to need it. And that happened in the dot-com era too, right? We laid
right,
so much
right,
fiber way before we needed all that internet capacity. So the same thing is happening again. And I would say another parallel thing, and it impacts design and innovation, is that we are leading with solutions instead of outcomes. We
right,
kind of get very excited about the new cool tech we have at our disposal. When we first had the web and we were discovering CSS and then there was JavaScript, it was, wow, look what we can do, you know. And we learned to tame all of that and tame some of our inclinations to lead with the shiny tech. And I think
right.
we're going through it again already. There's a reason why
Yeah,
everything right now looks like a chatbot, because that's
yeah,
just what we know right now. But I'm
exactly.
tracking things that are not chatbots, that are different. And I hope the stuff that I'm building with my partner in France is something a little bit above and beyond, and something with some design and some taste, a little bit of restraint, here is needed. A lot of
Yeah,
restraint actually.
yeah,
With AI.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we'll get to that too. I think I would agree. It feels like, okay, we figured out the kind of chat interface and what we can do with it. It's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And we're now scaling it as it is the final solution, or it's the last thing that we came up with. And I think that always leads to shaky grounds. You mentioned corporates and this sort of innovation muscle, right? I guess we want to talk about how do you take the corporate to the gym to train the muscle, right?
Well, usually they lead. We don't just knock on their door and say, "Hey, you want to come to the
Right,
gym? You want to work out?"
right. Okay.
Usually, there's a burning platform. There's some major stocks or shareholders sentiment, some major KPI, some needle that needs to be moved, and someone says, "Why aren't we innovating?" Or whatever. Why aren't we moving on AI?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
so whatever it is that's pushing it, usually there's a push from somewhere in leadership, and
Uh-huh.
innovation is either centralized or it's somewhat decentralized. I prefer the
Right.
latter, but there are
Yeah.
companies that have a kind of internalized labs, innovation units. Some work quite well, but my favorite approach is when they're already in conversation with their customers. They've opened innovation. So that, where you're really engaging with customers, kind of the labs moves out to them. The closer you get
Yeah.
that lab out to the customer, right, is the most exciting. I'm lucky to have a client this year who reached out to me. The CEO found me kind of randomly on Google, which whatever, it happens. And so glad I refreshed my website this year. Like I put up the new version of the brand, like literally a week later, he finds it. Right? So it was good timing. And so, they came to me and said, look, we've had this growth path. It's a kind of a B2B SaaS company. We've been
Yeah.
20 years and we're a market leader. And now we're not. We see the curve. We're seeing disruptive competitors. So that's their burning platform. That's their
Mm.
moment. Right. And they're like, can you facilitate a customer innovation summit? And they didn't even call it that. I kind of helped them frame it like, yeah, I
Right.
think what you
Right.
guys want to do is something like you want to engage your customers and you'd like to fly them into Orlando and have me kind of facilitate a conversation with them. Is that right? And he's like, yeah, that's it. Something like that. He didn't
Yeah.
even know what he was
Right.
asking for. But
Right.
we
Right.
shaped it and turned it into at least a 1-day event where they got to hear firsthand for the first time customers just digging into. And look, we did some futures work, like you touched on it earlier. We did some speculative fiction. We did a little bit of design future concepts, right? So like the world could evolve A, B, C, or D. Those 4-quadrant kind of
Yep.
classic 4-quadrant scenarios, right? And we explored those scenarios and how would you
Yeah.
respond if the world goes this way? So that's kind of how it's worked for me. And it's happens maybe once a year at best when a company like that comes along and is really hungry and ready. And it's exciting when it happens that way because they're ready and their teams were ready to engage
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. which is it's funny when we think about, right? You said, oh, they're finally talking to the customers, and you're like, what have you guys done before this time? Because you were successfully selling a product. You talked to the customer 20 years ago, and then kind of stopped and kept on selling. Well, good for you. But it's funny that I think companies, corporates, from a certain size on, maybe it's a size thing, right? Before even the shifting sands happen, I think that's when you sort of, okay, it becomes obvious that something is about to stop working. And but I always say corporates are the hardest to change themselves. I think it's almost impossible, but also to innovate. And yet everybody calls themselves, well, we're such an innovative company. And I think we both have the same sort of a nerd reflex there of like, okay, why does it not work? Right? It's a lot of brilliant people together, but everybody sort of talks to each other, but nobody talks change, because change is, well, difficult. It's ambiguous. And it questions KPIs. So I think it takes a certain mindset to plan and help to foster these type of conversations. And in my experience, the four quadrant and the sort of nature of like, oh, let's just speculate. I think when COVID hit, I think that happened in a lot of companies sort of naturally, because we finally hit this sort of big moment of like, well, we gotta actually have to think about how our business works. And I found myself being a designer in a company at that time, and it was actually the design department that, of course, by nature was the most comfortable with just speculating, okay, so in 18 months, 18 years, we have a next epidemic. In 18 months, this could look A, B, and C. And here's how we're going to prepare for these potential outcomes. So I think it was, I think it was sort of a speculative future moment that was brought close to a lot of us working inside the company. When you say, so, okay, this was a great example, and great that somebody finds you when the house is on fire. So who do we call? Let's call Curtis. So how do you prepare? Talk a little about the mechanics of this. Let's say this conversation that you had, right? I guess there's a preparation stage. You said that we're ready. Then there's an engagement stage, and then also, in my experience, the hardest work is when you then end a day or a sprint or a week like this, and everybody is high on this. How do we actually, well, then the work starts. How are we going to implement this, right? Without you being around eventually?
Right. Well, this was their first baby step in. And I would call this mid-sized company. This was in like Fortune 500 type company. Okay. So this is 150 employees type size company, right?
Right. That's a good size.
So this is a company where everybody kind of knows everybody. We're kind of under Dunbar's number. You've heard of Dunbar's number. It's the theoretical limit of how many sort of relationships one can have within one particular social network. I think it's like 200 something, So there's a kind of a family vibe here in the company,
Yeah.
And that may have been part of their challenge. It's easy to coast. We know each other. There's a kind of comfort with each other, giving each other a lot of slack. And what I was anticipating was, I'm going to shake the trees here. If I do my job right, they're going to have to not only look outward, but inward and say, what do we need to change internally? So I wanted to have both of those conversations. So with the first engagement a few months ago, and back in July, August, it was mostly outward. But they said, look, it was so fun, we want to do it again. So I said, great, we're going to do Customer Innovation Summit number 2. But this time we're going to do the inwards talk. We got to do both, because we need to like digest what happens after the customers leave, after we've done the engagement. Right. But in the preparatory kind of work, and in the first round, I created a tool, because we can just do this today with these AI tools. We created a tool to do like a really fast survey, but we let the bot do the survey for us. So there was a few canned questions to get started, but then the bot just took over and did the interviews for us. So we interviewed a lot of the people that were going to be coming into the summit, and that gave us a lot of qualitative data. Then we used more AI tools to kind of shape what came in those transcripts and all that information. We just created like how might we's, right? Classic kind of design thinking move. You want to have a nice, strong set of how might we statements. And they were very grounded and they were in their world, So that was the kind of prep work, so that in first evening, we could get everybody around those how might we statements. We could vote them and say, hey, tomorrow, we're going to dive into these futures. We're going to go to these 5, right, and go for it. So that's kind of preparatory work, and then the actual engagement, the way I like to lead and facilitate sessions. There's always a warm up. There's like fun and games, but like I've got so many different card games, Peter. I mean, I just usually pull one at random. Like I got brain spin, I've got group works, I've got management 3.0. I got a ton of different cards I can use. And I like to start with tabletop activities, right? Just games, and that's generally where teams team up, where we build a little bit of team camaraderie, and I always create a little bit of friendly competition. So each team kind of gains an identity. They give themselves a name, and then I say, all right, now we're ready. Now we're going to start, working on some ideation, and we're going to, dive in. So I always like to have a little bit of a friendly competition, and as teams do the work and they share out, we're comparing and contrasting what they did, their outputs, So that's kind of how it goes with me and what I like to lead, and I try to close with distilling what we really got out of it, get to the essence of some of the most important ideas. But I really felt in the engagement in August, I left a comma, and maybe I knew I was going to come back and do it again. We just scratched business models and ecosystems. Like, where are you in the wider ecosystem? And I just dabbled in there, and I said, that needs to be the start of the second engagement. So what we just did a week ago, deep dive into ecosystems. So like, let's look at your business like it's a network and it's part of a greater network, a network of networks. Let's visualize it. So again, we created a new tool. We vibe coded up a new tool that they could use. And it was a blast, and they enjoyed it. And we call it the value network game. And it's basically if you're think of any graph, like a social graph. There's nodes, there's actors, and they're connected via lines. Yeah. It's literally a graph visual, but the lines are value flows. So like a value flow could be a product or a service for money in return. So there's a line going from me, the provider, to you, the customer. But there's a line coming back, and you're paying me. That's the most basic business value flow there is, right? Money for product. But as you begin to look at an ecosystem, you start to see information flows. You start to see reputation flows, attention flows, and these hidden actors. And so we could put them all on a map and see more dots and lines, more actors, and then the potential for additional actors. Like, what if we had a partner here that could be a technology partner? What if we could have this kind of actor? What kind of flow could that support? So we're really looking for reciprocity. We're looking to build a resilient network. And that was a concept I leaned into pretty hard, like resiliency, and the robustness of your network. Is your supply chain vulnerable to, are you single sourcing things? Right. Things like that. So we got into that kind of conversation. What does your network look like now, and how could it be more robust, more resilient? So the tool we created allowed them to do a kind of before and an after. Again, scenarios, futures. They're getting to map it very quickly and easily through the app. And again, every team has got a name. The teams are in the app. They're competing, and then they were pitching the concepts after each round. So it moved in rounds, So yeah, that I'm kind of happy with the way this went, because I think it really gave them a perspective that a lot of business leaders don't often engage enough, which is like, where are we relative to our partners, our peers? And is there a larger network that we're not seizing yet? Are there opportunities we haven't seen yet that are outside of us, right? So it was a really fun one.
Yeah. So when you, it's funny because again, you had a few things like, you would think companies look at this all the time, but then, the day-to-day business does not let you look at your competitors as you always should. When you do this uncovery work, right, and you sort of pull back the curtain of like what could be versus what is, I wonder what's the ratio of like, what you find of like, oh, this is totally new. We never thought about this versus, we kind of know this, but we never acted on it.
Mm-hmm. There were some folks that, so in this latest round, I'm thinking back, that some were native to the company, been there for a long time. There was a little bit of that reaction, like, we knew this already. But as they looked around and saw the reactions of the customers that were in the room, and they were just like eyes getting bigger as they enjoyed the game and got into the game. I think there was a tacit recognition, even if they weren't going to give me credit for it and say, wow, thanks. I'm so glad they got this consultant to tell us something we didn't see yet. That's rare. We get that, right? We just have to assume we're making a good dent. People are getting their eyes open, even if they don't admit it. But yeah, I don't know if that quite answers your question, but I think that most people did not see. I mean, and I think I should probably do this as a follow-up survey, because I'm
Yeah,
working on a
yeah,
final recap right now. What I'm doing is
yeah,
I'm creating PDFs for each team, and I'm showing them where their journey went. So where their network started, and then where they completed at the end of the day, and it's huge. It's a difference, and
yeah,
they all
yeah.
created some big ideas, and I'm going to wrap it all up and
Right.
put it in a bow and send it out to everybody that took part in it last week.
Yeah.
And I think when they
So
step back and look at that, they're like, wow, yeah,
yeah,
we really thought of some fresh things that we didn't think of before.
yeah.
Yeah.
As you start these things, do you find you sort of uncover or meet sort of cheerleaders of change in a company already? There's sort of like I don't know, the silent disappointed one of like, I knew it all along. We have to change.
There were two types in this case, and maybe this applies in other situations. There were the people that have been there forever and hoping that the company would do this.
Oh,
And then there
interesting.
was another reaction, and they were cheerleaders for sure. And there was others who were like, one woman has innovation in her title. And,
Yeah.
here an outside guy is being brought in to do what might be considered her job.
Ooh.
That's
Shots fired.
awkward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get a mix of both of those things. And
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
there's always some kind of interesting drama going on between
Right.
various
Right.
sectors, and we manage
Exactly.
that quietly and hopefully
Yeah.
ahead of the event.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you never I mean, I would probably, I don't know, make the guess that a lot of innovation or newness thinking or whatever, right, is sort of stopped by internal politics and just power games. And it's just the human nature or the human behavior just gets in the way of like, oh, how do we move forward here, right?
Yeah.
Put it behind
Yeah.
you. Um, I wonder then, so as you leave this phase of like, okay, we uncovered, we've written down, great opportunity here. There's a danger of making a lot of money. How do you how do you then, I guess, well, handover is one way, or do you circle back and help then maybe the top leadership to sort of like, okay, let's galvanize this into programs that you can run.
Yeah.
And you mentioned
Yeah.
money earlier, right? So how do you, there's money, there's maybe new talent that needs to be hired to get something done that nobody can do right now. How far does it do you reach in the end to really
Yeah.
co-pilot
And this
this eventually?
is not very far. There was a day after session where we were doing that digesting the internal conversation, the turn inwards.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions I asked was, I said, based on everything you've heard yesterday, and assuming that you're reestablishing your market position, you're a market leader, what's
Mm-hmm.
next for you as a company? What could be created, what could be made possible now, kind of thing.
Right.
And that kind of question, I just repeated it and had them write silently. I repeated that question maybe 10 times,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
giving them the space, each one of them to just go, okay, we already are this. We've already been this kind of software company. What we heard yesterday was the ecosystem, the wider network needs us to be
Mm-hmm.
something more than that. We might become a certifying authority in something beyond
Right.
software, and something like a new kind of standard. We might be going direct to some of these end customers instead of indirect B2B. We might do a B2C. There were so many things that were sort of teased on day one.
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, what is it? What is it calling you to be? And I knew that was going to land in some difficult places, because I know that, the leadership is not all of the same mind on this,
Right.
and the
Right.
new people
Right.
that they've hired are very excited about growing the company in these new directions. Some of the folks are not. So, I mean, it was a tough conversation to hold. And it felt like they were ready to consider a type of innovation hub type of that they could form that, and they could be that for the ecosystem. And that was great. I would call that a victory. We put a sharp
Right.
definition on it. We did a little sailboat graphic where, what are the winds pushing your ship forward? What are the rocks you might run into if you go towards this thing? What are the anchors that are slowing your boat down? It's a good exercise to always do. Do a
Yeah.
good sailboat. Works well
Yeah.
for a retro. It works really well for a strategy conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
true.
was a vital conversation over 3 hours. That's enough that's enough for them to chew on for a couple months, and it's their job. It's not mine, So
Yeah.
I won't be engaging. Like, I'm not going to be the inside change guy. They have to do that. right?
Right. But they eventually reach out and say, "Hey, come back and help us to do this part or that part."
I would think so. I would hope so.
So, and it also sounds like typically, and maybe by cliche, those are businesses or operation that sort of really feel the need now to change, right? And sort of everybody has, even though there's resistance, still has understood on the baseline, well, something has to happen. We cannot go back to what it was before because we're not going to be around anymore. So I think that's a great wind in your sails or a storm brewing that you have to get away from. So yeah, that's funny. I remember I was, one of the reasons why I find this so fascinating, obviously you work in design all your career and, you're always in this, well, there's this department called design that works with a lot of what you said, but it's also meant to do day-to-day product development or whatnot, right? And once in a while it gets to think outside of the box a little bit more. And I think in successful design cultures, this is done without being asked, right? So design runs its own, hey, let's imagine our business in 10 years and just throws these like stones into the pond and see what waves it creates. And ideally it has a safe space from executive leadership to do that. But I remember I was working, I think it was still at Steelcase, and we were designing for one of the big four or eight, I don't know, four for consultancies. That we ran a program with them to figure out how does a space would look like to do all these facilitations that you mentioned, right? So how could space kind of support that behavior, like taking down resistance to change. And I think we uncovered one of the most important things. This was it was more on the top leadership level, was to actually get the calendars freed up, to have people ready to not constantly, get the phone out, right? But also be ready to get the phone away from you because your assistants, all of these PAs have worked months ahead to clear your schedule so that you're just in the right headspace to actually receive what needs to be said. And that was a fascinating thing. And we did this whole journey. I believe still this could actually become a separate business for these guys. Just having these spaces and bring people in and see how space can change to just eventually help you to change. You mentioned you had some great examples of how AI is already, or how you used it, right? I mean, you mentioned, of course, the recent hot word vibe coding, but even before that, right? You said the bot took over. Well, we don't want it to take over generally, but here we want to. So I think there was already like a great example, and maybe segue into how do you see AI playing this? Of course, there is an element of accelerating what's there. I think that it will do a great job. But do you think that companies might be also able, with new tools and internal assistants, being prompted to innovate maybe earlier, right? Maybe there is the company's wider operating system, the company's Siri. No, not Siri. This is a dumb one. The other one, the Amazon one, maybe says, hey, you guys need to innovate because the future is, according to my signals, things are going to change. How do you look at this AI? And I guess innovation is broader, but mainly what you do.
Yeah, well, I look closely. I mean, for one, I track it because I write for a magazine called Innovation Leader, and I'm sort of the beat reporter for AI. So I better know a little something. I better
you
be
better
up on
know
this
it.
stuff.
You better know stuff.
And Innovation Leader, or InnoLead for short, it's corporate innovators. These are larger companies that have big innovation units or something, R&D teams, whatever, big design teams. And so I am looking at mostly, sadly, the kind of dipping of toes into the water is using AI as just, like you said, accelerants, efficiency, cost cutting. So how can we just 10x reduce the cost of a human customer service center and make it completely autonomous? Things like that. But the most interesting examples that I'm tracking, the ones that are exciting, that I think point towards where we could go or where it should go, are where we are using these tools to change how we designers and innovators do our craft. How we get someone over the classic problem of a blank page, right?
Yeah.
It's so much more interesting sometimes to have someone react to something than to try to create all out of whole cloth, right?
100%, yeah.
The inspiration for the app that we built for this client, the one that was gamified, that, we moved the teams through rounds and there were all that points and so forth. That came from going to the Innovation Leader Conference in Boston a few months ago. And my friend Matt Stewart from Disruptive Edge did a wargaming app that he built with his team. And all of a sudden you just step into this workshop and you are a food tech company. You're like, our company was called Sell You Feast, and we were like into plant-based like petri dish grown meats, basically, right? Cell grown meats kind of thing. And, we had a market position, we had a history, but the other people were on teams with different sort of portfolios. And each round we made bets. We either doubled down on R&D or we pushed into marketing, but we had a fixed budget to work with. And every round, the rankings changed, right? Who's going to win, right? And it was so damn fun. It was so fast moving. An hour flew by in 10 minutes. It felt like 10 minutes. And I went up to Matt afterwards. I said, this is great. I said, this is what I'm going to do with my client coming up. We're going to build something like this. That's where the inspiration came from. And I think the more we can use these tools to what you want them to do is not accelerate but catalyze certain moments, key moments in the ideation, key moments in the synthesis part, where you got too much data. Now you just need to do some condensation. The tools are good at this. They're pretty damn good. You got people writing a lot of blah, 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 blah. Man, when you say, hey, AI, turn that into a classic value prop statement where it begins with, unlike the competition, this blah, 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 blah. And you tell it to do that structure, and people go, wow, that's what I was trying to say. But they have to struggle first. They have to come up with a blah, blah, blah. Okay. But then when you let the AI write that perfect one-liner, that crystallized value prop statement, and then they see it back and and then they can tweak that a little bit. These kind of moves are super leverage. I think that gives us so much leverage as designers and innovators. And I just think that's where we're going to, well, it's like what they say, like when AI and AGI come, we're going to solve for cancer. We're going to do all these cool things, because what it's unlocking is our thinking. And that's what Jedi on the Fly is about. My other venture, besides just Curtis, me, myself, and I, as a facilitator, I'm working with a partner in France. We're called Jedi on the Fly. And our slogan is, we don't fine-tune models, we fine-tune teams.
Exactly.
Right?
I think that's a great distinction.
It's really about how we use it in teams, in situ, in design, in innovation, at key moments, injecting just the right amount. It has to be done very carefully. If we go too much further than getting them over the blank page, we're doing all the work for them, right? We can't do that. That would be depriving the team of doing the work, right? So it's this balance we have to create.
I love that fine-tuning teams and people. And I mean, it's also like, a balancing notion of like, we're fine-tune technology all the time, but we're actually not upgrading ourselves as we should. And I love this line, we have technology like, 21st century, but the human development is still sort of like Middle Ages, right? So something like that. So there's this huge gap in between. Before we go to Jedi on the Fly, which I love because I'm a Star Wars person, I would also argue that, all that what you described of like a person getting this one-liner back, getting this motivational push, right? With an AI, I think you mentioned this sort of centralized and decentralized teams or hubs, or just notion of innovating. You could argue that, if everybody has a co-pilot and, you have, 25 product managers. That's usually when things start to go wrong, actually. But every one of them sort of gets to ask that blank sheet moment, like, so here's my product lineup. I gotta have to innovate now. How am I going to do it? Right. So, and then the AI comes back with sort of a motivational speech from so some pointers, and you go and start doing it. So in a way, it helps to decentralize the kind of readiness for getting over the hump of like, okay, newness, right? And then let the human, if every human starts doing this, all of these 25 in that example, then we're eventually getting to a bigger wave of like change that's coming totally from the inside.
One really just like key principle, I think, if we all did it and practiced it, it would make everyone's work with AI so much more interesting. Don't just share the outputs. I do this with my partner, Hamid, in France, the Jedi guy. I say, we always share the whole journey. Like, we get to an output that we really like, something like, oh, that's a cool idea. But we always go back and we share with each other exactly how we prompted, the turns in the conversation, how I steered the AI. Because, it's going to come back with something, and half of it's like, not great, so I'm going to push back. And if there's not a push and pull and you're not arguing and pushing back against the AI,
Hmm.
it's doing too much work for you. The
Absolutely.
best thing we can do is share with each other how we use it. Like, even if you do an image generation, cool. Okay, you created some funky thing, a monkey on the moon, whatever it is. Share with people how you did it. What tool I use. This is the prompt I used. It took
Right.
3 turns, 3 shots, whatever. Like, I think we have to make the whole thing a lot more transparent, because I
Yeah.
do think it's creepy when we just see the outputs and it looks too polished. I'm like, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
sweat at all? Did you
Which I
work?
think, in a future, yeah, maybe you don't have to sweat anymore, because the thing is just like on the Enterprise, it's the computer who knows everything. Right. I'm just rewatching Enterprise, so I'm also Trekkie.
Okay.
But I think we have this, like, to your point, we have this already misguided expectation that I'm getting the answer. What I'm getting is the truth, right? Or is right, must be right. We ignore that there's a legal fine print. Oh, this thing, there's not always is right. Right. But in our head, we already made up our mind, because we love simplicity. What am I getting is what I'm going to work with. And I think if we would have, I said this to somebody else the other day, if ChatGPT would just ask a few more follow-up questions, right? It would be just programmed as in, like, sometimes to just say, oh, I don't know, actually.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be actually such a healthy moment for us, right? For also the alignment gap somewhere, as in, like, sorry, Peter, I don't really know. I don't have an answer. That would be for me sort of like, oh, wait a minute, I have to.
I think
Okay.
that's a really cool
Yeah.
design initiative that I wish OpenAI would do. I forced it to do that, Peter. I literally changed my system prompt, and I told it, you talk to me, I literally said, hey, I want you to every so often sprinkle in this phrase, Curtis, I might be hallucinating here,
Right.
but
Right.
I think. And it was great, and it just took it down a notch. I could be totally
I
wrong
agree.
here, Curtis.
Yeah.
And Curtis can be totally wrong here too. And if we're using it that way, 2 minds, quote unquote, I'm putting quotes there, 2 minds working together that don't have all the
Right.
answers, that's exciting
Exactly.
as hell. It's a lot of fun to work that.
Exactly.
Right.
Because you get to keep these pockets of, well, at least perceived ambiguity of, like, oh, I need to go and do something different. I have to change medium. Now, I think, it would be a great feature for OpenAI, but would be openly acknowledging that we're not as far, and the valuation would go down. So can possibly not do that, right? I mean, that's kind of the sort of weird circular moment that you're in. Things are, well, I guess that's what leads to the bubble. But nevertheless, let's talk Jedi on the fly. I mean, the name's the program, I think. Talk us through this. You mentioned you gave already a few pointers, but Jedi on the fly.
So,
obviously, we all want to know how the naming convention came about, but we can cover this later.
I always ask when I work with a new company, I always say, where does your name come from? Genesis is always interesting, right? There's always a great story about a name.
Right.
So, Jedi on the Fly was actually the name of a custom GPT that my partner Hamid built. And it was when I knew that I really wanted to work with this guy, because and we can share a link to this in chat if you want to attach a few notes to this podcast.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. What's so lovely about this GPT that he made was it crystallized. One of the cool uses for these tools is to say, I need to apply a very unique intelligence, not just like someone who knows everything about gardening or some expert, but a weirdo kind of that's an intersection. Like, for example, I'll give you how I used one the other day. I made a Jedi on the fly for my son, who's behind on calculus. Now, I know my son loves cars, mechanics. He works on cars and engines, and he's a musician. He's learning to play. He's learning to riff. He's learning grunge.
Oh, nice.
Okay, he's learning Alice in Chains riffs. So I asked Jedi on the fly, basically, I need someone that's a damn good calculus tutor who can reach kids who love music and mechanics, And when you see the way this thing unfolds and then you put it into action, it's so good. It's such a good use of AI. That's where it meets you. And so that was just, I said, wow, I love what he's doing. And the more that I've worked with my partner and the more that we've really done kind of deeper kind of meta prompting, it's more like we prompt the prompt. If you haven't discovered meta prompting yet, please do it. Okay. Like, don't just talk to the AI back and forth. The first thing, if you discover someone else's GPT, for example, someone shares their little GPT with you, the
Right.
first thing you might want to ask it is, what can you do? Tell me your jam, and have it just sort of describe itself. Then you might say, how best should I prompt you? Tell me how you like to be prompted. Then you can even go to another tool and ask it to create a prompt for this thing you're working with. So using them in a kind of adversarial way against each other in a way. So it's kind of a meta prompting thing, right? It's
Yeah.
super powerful because frankly, it knows a better way to prompt itself than you could ever come up with. Okay.
Right.
You
Right.
always get a lot of mileage by doing that.
That's right.
So Jedi was just the discovery that the real leverage comes from there's such subtlety in words. I mean, this thing, let's give credit where it's due. It's called a large language model for a reason. It's damn good with language. Okay,
Exactly. It has a
my
large
partner
font of
speaks
such.
my
Yeah.
partner speaks French. I speak English. It can go back and forth between those two languages and 3 or 4 or 10 others, not
Right.
losing meaning, and it's amazing. So
Yeah.
language
Yeah.
is its jam. So it makes sense that if we learn to use the subtleties of language, the nuances of language, the semantics of language. I was a philosophy major. I'm back to my old days,
Right.
ontologies, right? Thinking in terms of ontologies and taxonomies, because this thing loves those things. It responds so
Right.
well to those.
Right. Right.
So that's the kind of place that we're coming from with Jedi, and the tools that we're building are tapping into that nuanced ontological superpower that it has, and we're learning to just apply it and these hopefully just right doses, right,
Right.
for innovation,
Right.
for design, and so forth. Yeah,
Which is which is super interesting because if you think about a lot of even that workshop, right, that you described, a lot
yeah,
comes just down to phrasing, framing, language. How do you
yeah,
make people feel? How do you make people? You said fine tune, right? How is the
mm,
listener being fine tuned just to react and respond eventually? And maybe that's one of the big flaws that we have sort of baked in or let it evolve is that the internet in general, how we communicate on the internet, does not carry a lot of these nuances that you described that are so important of how we might feel. That's why we feel so shit when we read stuff on the internet, right?
yeah,
And I said the other day, nuances just they don't travel well on
yeah,
LinkedIn, on certainly on Twitter, right? So we
yeah,
kind of by design cut out a lot of the kind of meat or underlying frequencies that language has by paying attention to exactly that. So I
yeah.
think this is great. This is
I would
such,
also
yeah.
I'll share just a tip, if you call it that. But I mean, something we do a lot is we add twists. Like you're in a conversation with an AI about whatever, but we throw in what we call a twist.
Right.
It's a simple turn of phrase that will completely change the conversation. It's sort of like take that conversation in an oblique angle. And of course, for design and
Mm-hmm.
innovation, that's kind of what you want. You want to reapproach something from another angle. So take almost anything, like just some. Tell me your favorite anime series, Peter.
Oh, Ghost in the Shell or Akira. I give a lot away here. But
Okay, Ghost in the
yeah.
Shell.
Yeah, Ghost in the Shell.
So you could say you're in a conversation, and then you could say Ghost in the Shell ify it, like funkify it, like you put that ify it on the back of
Mm-hmm.
whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite
Right.
anime
Right.
is
Right.
Naruto. Okay, I like
Yeah.
Naruto. Okay,
Yeah.
and if
Naruto.
I
Yeah.
say Naruto ify it, that's a
Right.
twist. You just put that on there. It will take whatever we're talking about and cast it in terms
In
of the
that light.
Naruto anime series,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
You
Yeah.
can KPI-ify it. You can JTBD-ify it. That's jobs
Yeah.
to be done.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can
Yeah. Yeah.
Kinevin-ify it. In
Yeah.
other words, we call it extreme semantic economy. That's one of our
Oh,
favorite
that's a good one.
phrases. And when
Yeah.
we talk to AI, we tell it to use extreme semantic economy, right?
I like
Conserve
that.
some of the tokens here, because it's very chatty. But these twists are so cool, and you can almost try it with anything. You could just do
Yeah.
it as a joke,
Yeah.
like Zoomify it, pencilify it. It's crazy, but it will take the conversation in a really creative direction.
Right.
And you can
Right.
insert these
Right.
twists in this. It's awesome in ideation, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just mentioning my favorite anime series. So I'll obviously gonna go and try it. This particular tool, Jedi on the Fly, how
Yeah.
you have used it with clients already, or how much is it something
Well,
you recently come up with?
honestly, it's just a very loose consultancy at the moment. We're
Mhm.
advisory, but the
Right.
closest that we have to a product, quote unquote, is what we delivered last week to my client, which is
Got it.
this gamified
Yeah.
thing we call the Value Network game. So
Right.
that will become a product. That is something we will be pushing in 2026 to use the course ourselves, but also we would license out to other innovators, consultants,
Right. Right.
people like us that would find
Yeah.
this really useful for their design thinking or their other workshops, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love the approach because it takes the human on the other side into consideration, which it has to, right? One of the problems is that we just don't take the human into consideration, and we just like, oh, technology, let it go, we'll be fine. Turns out
Yeah.
it's not so fine. So I think this is a great approach that
That's
you guys are
yeah,
working on.
definitely.
Nice. All right. Do you want to do some questions?
Yeah.
Questions. We had you brought this to me in our pre-call, the 250 things that an architect should know. And
Yeah.
you suggested, because the podcast is not usually, about Q&A. Why do we do questions and questions?
Yeah.
And you suggested let's take a few of these questions, which they're great. And I think questions, I think they're actually more statements, but of these 250 things that architects should know, and replace the word architect with designer and see what happens here.
Right.
So maybe to a quick explainer on 250 things an architect should know. It was written by Michael Sorkin.
Yes.
There the book is, right? You're holding it up. It's an audio only
Yep.
podcast for radio people, but look it up, folks. Look it up. I put a link in the show notes. And Michael Sorkin was an architect, critic, and theorist, and he published this list as a reflective piece, drawing on the architecture's, well, call it tradition of passing down judgment and lived experience, right, rather than rules or techniques, which I think is a great and very effective concept of teaching.
I do too.
And what I love about this is that teaching naturally evolves with the time. In that
Yeah.
sense, it's not about the brittleness of rules and literalisms, and literalism is the foundation of fundamentalism, right? So that is I love that about this. Here's what you should know, and depending what in the
Yeah.
grand scheme you read this in, you will interpret this differently,
And
as we
I
will
would say
do. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
would say for like if imagine you're a first year architecture student at a good
Right.
architecture school, and if this was your first exposure, you're not quite ready for it.
Yeah,
This is a bit of
exactly.
an advanced technique. Okay, there is some
Exactly.
grounding
Yeah,
required in architecture.
yeah,
And
that's true. That's
I'll read a couple of them here just so folks know what we mean. Like I'm just a page at random here.
sure.
Number 139, the value of human life. Okay, that's
Right.
all it says.
Right.
The
Right.
value of human life. Now that's one of the 250 things every architect should know. Okay, you could that could be a whole semester study right there, but that's not
Exactly.
for a first year architecture student. Okay,
Right.
this is
Right.
these are
Right.
the Jedi advance moves. You know, do you know
Right.
the notion of Shu Ha Ri, that martial arts philosophy?
I don't.
Shu Ha Ri is it's a lovely. It's also just a metaphor. It means that there's these levels of learning, and at Shu, you learn a rule. You have to learn the rules. If you're going to learn karate, sorry, you're going to
Right.
have to go through the levels, right? You learn the
Right.
katas, you learn the rules. These are kind of patterns. When you get a level up, you're into ha, and that means you're ready to break a rule.
Break. I see.
You
Okay.
can
Yeah, that's
break
great.
rules because
That's
now
great.
you begin to
Yeah.
understand patterns and how
Right.
to mix them up and go, oh, well, pattern B doesn't follow pattern A the way I was taught pattern B, so I'm going to have to modify pattern B,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
When you
Well,
get to read,
yeah.
yeah, when you
That's
get to
how
the read, sorry?
design school works. That's how design school works also. You
Yeah,
first do
yeah,
it by
yeah.
the book, and then at some point you're like, I
Yeah,
know why I
all
break that.
education, any
Exactly.
baby beginner education in any
Exactly.
subject, you have to teach things wrong. Let's just be honest,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
So there's another level where you begin breaking rules. And then there's which is mastery. And this book is about mastery, where you become the rule. That's the literal Japanese
Exactly.
translation. become the rule.
Yeah.
And you can't even explain why you're doing what you're doing anymore. It's just inside you. It's seeping out of every pore. That's where Michael Sorkin is coming from when he wrote 250 Things. Like, this is mastery. Okay, distilled.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And having a list of 250 things you should know, even as a first semester or first time student, is a good sort of like, okay, this is how far it reaches. All right. It's a good grounding. Okay. We thought we're going to pick 10 questions each. And I do it through the eyes of a designer. And
I did it through the eyes of an innovator. So we have two interesting paths here.
There we go. So why don't you go first and tell us what question you picked and why?
Yeah. And this was so timely because I actually printed these out. You can't see them in the podcast, but I'm showing Peter.
Oh, you made cards
They're
of
actually
it. Yeah,
printed
nice.
cards.
Nice. That's great.
They were there as backup if I had time with my client. I was going to, but probably they were not ready for this either. Okay, so.
That's a good icebreaker, though.
It could be an icebreaker. So the first one I have is the role of metaphor. The role of metaphor in shifting mindsets. And the question is like, how could you make a comparison, something strange be familiar or make the familiar strange? This is very much about creating new language and metaphors. I'm part of a community right now called the Network First Manifesto. And these are just network people that are into social network analysis, organizational network analysis. And, we're hanging out on this Slack together. And one woman said, we need to interrogate our language. Why do we accept certain words and terms that are very metaphorically laden? So they're even interrogating a phrase like all hands meeting. Is there a better way to say that? Right? Or what is a networker? If we're in this new network world, what does it mean to be a project manager, to lead a project in a network first world? Well, they spent an hour figuring that out and they came up with the word catalyst. Okay.
Catalyst,
language, again, to go back to why it's good to interact and play with these large language models. They can really, if we use them appropriately, they can really give us new metaphors, help us like unlock things with new language, right?
Yeah.
Opens vista. Yeah.
I think metaphors are, they come to us naturally at some point. To some people, easier to some others, I think. And also great vehicles to convey and make a great understanding.
Hey, you just used a metaphor. They're vehicles.
There we go. That's so meta. Metaphors are metaphors. All right, my first one. I actually, when I found myself reading those and picking those, which was hard, I think I went back to my sort of, I mentioned the sort of role of a designer, but also going back to the more analog and physical design. I think is something I'm sort of recently anyway, starting to gravitate back to a little bit more. So the first one stuck with me because I couldn't get over it. And that's the feel of cold marble under bare feet. And I was like, yes, why? Because I think, especially in design, and the whole conversation about design, right? And tech is all omnipresent. We over-glorify the virtual experience, and we tend to forget that we're actually fundamentally analog beings shaped by physical sensations after all. And in a way, language is part of that, right? And it's an analog experience. So, and I think this, I always say, when people on Instagram make a photo and make a macro photo of rust that they found or some natural texture, and I'm like, oh, this is such a funny reflex that we have. We're so used to glossy surfaces and everything looks perfect on screen and curvature here and there and pixel perfect, that when we see actually imperfect nature, we're fascinated beyond. And I just like, this is such an interesting observation. So I think feeling materials and just grounding
I love it for so many reasons. I mean, for one, there's clearly a hunger for kids who have been oversaturated on screens, TikTok. I don't think it's any surprise this generation came up with ASMR. Are you familiar with ASMR?
Help me. ASMR.
Okay, so this is, I can't tell you what it stands for. It's an acronym, but it's the psychological definition of the feeling you get, the palpable, embodied feeling you get when you hear a sound. And I'll give you an example of the sound. Let's see, I could do it with, here, I'll take a deck of cards and I'm going to put it right into the microphone. You ready? Here.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Or I can scrape it across the mic.
Right.
ASMR. Okay, that's ASMR, and they will listen to that, and it's a palpable sensation, and they describe getting tingly bodily
Oh
sensations.
yeah, 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 yeah,
All
yeah.
virtual, but there's a craving for a
There's a
physicalized
craving. Yeah,
experience, right?
yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah,
that is maybe there's a reason why you see on Reels or when people create their content, there is now such a I perceive it as there's such a crispness and a crispness, not Christmas, and pristineness, and maybe
yeah.
also paying attention to these little sounds and maybe overplaying this also, right? ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response.
Autonomous
Here we
sensory.
go. My God, a term like a German word, long like a cargo train. Anyway, so yeah, absolutely. So that was my
Could I just
first.
add one more to why I like what
Of
you're
course,
doing there? I think Apple should have been listening to you. Have you upgraded to the latest version of iPhone's OS or the Mac OS?
I have on both. I'm a bit disappointed on the phone, but I kind of like the Mac. I'm a
Okay. I'm
Mac
finding
fanatic.
liquid glass a little underwhelming, frankly.
Oh
And I
yeah,
know
yeah,
they were
I agree.
going for a lot of pixel perfection here, and I'm like,
I
"Man, that
agree.
was a lot of effort for I'm not sure a lot of gain."
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah,
That's maybe that's sort of the beginning of or more and more obvious departure from the core fundamentals of just works
yeah.
and the sort of beauty of things actually working together, right? Like what
It
made
feels like
Apple
they're
what
from
made
their
Apple often at gold standards. But well, we can have a whole episode on Apple, and
yeah, yeah,
if you have 15 product managers on stage, you kind of know where this is going in the company, right? And
yeah, yeah.
so I'm hoping this is going to go back to the gold standard that we all need to, well, sell what we're doing, to be honest. But we can't really use it anymore. That's yeah.
The final word on this, because it's such a rich one. See what you stirred up with your bare
I know.
marble on this, right? Uh, I do think the hunger is also for phygital, like the
Yep,
hybrid, the physical
absolutely,
digital experience.
absolutely.
And the further we go into virtual reality, the more there will be a counterbalancing. We want to be out in concerts again. We're buying
Right,
phonographs, touching vinyl. Like,
right.
we
Experiences. We're
got to
buying
keep that in
experiences.
the
Right,
mix. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's why
Oh,
experience travel is on a going to
so
be
true.
probably even higher than it
Oh
will
yeah.
be.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Wait, next.
Second
All
question.
right.
What do you have?
All right. So yeah, not a question, but just sort of another sort
Oh,
of
the
statement,
statement.
something that
Right, right.
I think every innovator should know. I heard this expression years ago, and I think it was when I was a business analyst. It was an IIBA conference. Maybe it was there. I don't know. But I could never find the author of the quote, but it says, "A rough measure of the right thing is better than a precise measure of the wrong thing."
Right, right.
And
Very
I
good.
see
Very good.
this over and over and over
Yes, yes.
again.
As the innovation consultant, for sure.
Yeah, and and honestly, when I said KPIify it, KPIs are not my favorite thing in the world.
Right.
Neither are
Uh,
OKRs.
yeah.
Okay. There's always, of course, a desire to put strong quantitative handles on any kind of
Mm,
squishy idea. Of course, we feel safer with them.
right.
But the risk is that we start measuring what's easy to measure, which often tends to be the wrong thing to measure. Like we lose measuring just simply engagement, but we're measuring clicks. That doesn't necessarily mean we're getting real lasting passion, engagement, or whatever your experience is you're designing for, the innovation you're doing. We often end up measuring the wrong thing. Right. And so I just have always felt that a rough measure of the right thing is better than a precise measure of the wrong.
That's very true. Right on.
Hmm.
My second pick was a statement. Well, it's not a question. A statement number 6. Every designer should know the distance of a whisper.
Mm.
And I saw that in the light we have to. It goes back to an innovation consultant as well.
Yeah.
We have to recognize the fragility of ideas
Hmm.
and why rational and rational thinking should not stamp out immediately the sort of nonsense making thought or spoken word or what somebody just put out there, right? I think especially in business, we often tend to like translate it immediately into, okay, but how is this going to help us now?
Yeah.
How does it make money? Well, how does it move the bottom line? And I'm like, these things move the bottom line when you let them grow. And just because something is foreign and weird and odd, give it
Yeah.
time to get the oddness, get comfortable with it. So I think ideas are fragile. I also think true novelty requires quiet restraint and the ability
Yeah.
to listen what the inner compass is actually saying about you, your work, what you're doing. And
Yeah.
so the distant whisper, I think, is the very underestimated and maybe, not listened to thing. Also, live, we play it on number 11 and we seldom dial it back to
Yeah.
1 to just
Yeah.
sit with us, right? I'm a meditator,
Yeah.
so I'm speaking obviously in that metaphor. But so I
Yeah.
think that to me is something every creative, every human needs to go back to.
Oh, I love it. I love the phrase too. Distant whisper. That's
Yeah,
nice.
the distance of a whisper.
Distance of a whisper. That's lovely. A poetic quality to it. Indeed. I was talking to some folks that might have me speak at their conference next year, and they kept asking me, "Tell me how it's practical. You're a
Yeah,
big idea, Curtis. Tell me
right,
how it boils down to something our CEOs can use the very
right,
next day."
right, right.
And man, that's a pretty damn high and I think somewhat irrational bar to put on something that could change the course of their thinking that they're
Right,
not going to absorb in one moment and put into practice the very next day,
right,
you know?
exactly,
But there's
exactly.
a fear
Yeah,
of letting it sit and marinate for a while and going, I don't really know what Curtis meant by that, but I know there's something there. I'm glad he said it, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are also the kind of oddballs you have to throw into corporate environments, right? When
Right.
you need dirt to grow ice crystals.
Yes. All right. Next one. This one goes to people and culture similarly that along similar lines. Giving credit to others for your ideas is a
Oh, yeah,
superpower.
absolutely.
It's hard to do, especially when you're inside these cultures. I find it easier to do when I'm outside because, right,
Right,
I'm
right,
often
right.
there to lift other people up to kind of get everybody some spotlight, not me as a consultant. But inside the incentive structures are, performance
Exactly,
reviews and
exactly.
look what I did and look at the KPIs I moved. I just think if you can eat that humble pie and give credit. And especially when that person realizes too, it's super powerful when they realize you gave them credit for something that, you guys had lunch a month ago and you really put that idea in their head.
Right, right.
They figured out how to sell it. So let them sell it. They landed the idea. So
Yeah,
what?
yeah,
Started it
yeah,
doesn't matter, right? Right? Be
yeah,
generous that way,
yeah.
right?
I agree. I've been part of executive leadership sort of change workshops, which in itself is sometimes an oxymoron. But
Mhm.
there was this moment of like, give credit to one of your peers here that something you appreciate. People pulled out surprisingly way back things that they remembered and like, but never told, never shared. And I was
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
why do we never share this, right? So it's very powerful, and it creates, I think, great. It overcomes a lot of these sort of what we earlier said, hostile politics. You just give somebody credit for something, and
It's
like, oh,
powerful.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, human moment here. Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
My third question is the question statement 36 is something every designer should know something about Vastu Shilpa, Vastu, the Indian sort of Indian way of feng shui and quality of
Mm.
spaces, energy of spaces. Goes back to the physical sensation of things, right? I
Mhm.
think it's important, even no matter what design you do, architects obviously, because if we valued spatial wisdom more deeply, I think we would design, we would live, we would work better, and we would create more spaces that align with the human nature, what we need to thrive.
Mhm.
And I generally think the spaces we live and work in are designed and created. Most is absolute garbage, right?
Yeah.
Look at even the most modern office. Sure,
Mhm.
you can amend a lot of things and you can tweak this to a nice space. But I think in general, especially living quarters, like you look at condo development, it's
Yeah.
absolutely not designed for just general baseline of well-being. So, and I think as designers are in general becoming more sort of boundary fluent, right? I'm sure we do
Mhm.
products, but products translate into physical experience, they translate into spaces. Every product, every experience happens in a space, right? Is it
Mm.
outdoors or indoors? So I think a lot about the quality of spaces, and it drives me up the wall when a space
Mm.
is not right. And obviously you guess already, me going and finding a house to live together with my wife, we're both very difficult customers. It's an absolute nightmare for us to go and house hunt because we
Yeah.
know this is just, so yeah, everybody should know about, I think, the quality
Say
of
it
what
again. Vastu what?
Vastu Shilpa. I hope I pronounced this right. Vastu. I know it under Vastu. And in fact, we design our living quarters after the Vastu principles and after a Vastu consultant that comes in. And in China, you have it more with the Feng Shui, and in India, it's the Vastu. So
cool.
It's about energy, spaces, where you put colors, where you don't put certain things, right? And I think every time then when I come around, I'm like, okay, let's do it. You feel it immediately. I feel it immediately. The energy of a space changes, and you're like, okay, this seems to work. So I think it's something we should teach kids.
I love it. That's great. I'm going to give you one more. I'm going to say, and this takes us kind of back to where we started with design fictions and storytelling. Sometimes fiction is truer than truth.
Oh, I mean, are we heading into the world of Blade Runner or not? You tell me. My favorite movie, so I'm biased.
Is that one of your tops? Yeah.
Oh, that's absolute favorite movie.
I mean, it is odd how, or amazing, or just confirming how so much sci-fi ends up becoming what we end up living, right?
Yeah. Good sci-fi takes now signals and amplifies them into what could be. So sci-fi is always grounded in a sliver of reality.
Oh, more than that, I think so. And design fictions are powerful because they're stories. They're just stories. Right. Yeah. But the pictures they paint and the spaces they open up for us, the possibilities they open up for us are super powerful. Right?
And powerful, and I always say stories are sticky. They move us. They have the ability to transport us along and to motivate us. Everybody wants to look at data. Oh, let's make a data grounded decision. I'm like, data is fast and slippery and changes every day. But a story that's irrational but motivating, that can transform everything.
Have you ever used a technique called cover story for this kind of thing?
Not by the name, but maybe I've used it sort of not knowing what I'm doing.
Yeah, some call it postcard from the future, that kind of idea.
Yeah. I called it press release from the future.
There you go. There's a variety of names for it. Press release from the future. Yeah. These are very powerful. I used it recently in that workshop last week, and that they just were able to stick their pitches so much more powerfully by telling a future story that says just like this is the North Star. If we hit it out of the park, this is what it would look and feel like if we could make this reality happen. Right? Yeah.
I used it in my last job, press release from the future, and Okay, my next pick would be, there's so many good. I have 10, there's so many good, but I go line by line. Every designer should know the color wheel. Was statement 38. The color wheel, I think we have to relearn and just become more bold again. We have to relearn about the energetic and emotional power of color on products in the world of just our environments. We're just shying away. I think the Western world is in general very afraid of using color in anything. The way we dress, the way we purchase cars. You can't even find a red car, it feels like. And I think I recently read that the color of the year, I think Pantone always announced the color of the year. It was something like cloud, or somebody called it tofu. And I was like, okay, here we go. Another colorless color. I don't know if that's right, if this technically actually possible, but another like bland, right? Another bland moment. And I was just thinking, why is this? And is it because we're living in such polarized times, and hence we're going for non-polarizing colors because we don't want to have more friction, more arguments, more disagreement. And all the way to like coming back to KPIs. My KPIs are in question because I picked a color that everybody disagrees with. It's just, I don't know. I think though we're heading in such a bland product situation, or just environment. I think color is actually so important. If you look at the ancient...
I like your political hypothesis. There's probably some truth to that.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
In the United States, there's the red camp and the blue camp, politically speaking. They're just tribal and they're screaming at each other. But I don't think we've I kind of honestly could understand why we might want to blend something boring in the middle between red and blue. We often talk about purple. Is there anyone purple out there that could like blend red and blue? Please.
Yeah. That's right. Purple used to be my favorite color, actually. So, again, because it has blue and red, and both are passionate. And purple always I equate it with the color of jazz. Just by listening to jazz, My head
Yeah.
always turns,
I
not the
love
head
it.
turns purple, the inside.
Are you do you have a bit of synesthesia? You know that
Oh,
phrase?
not just a bit. I have confirmed large amounts or high. I don't know. Yeah, no, that was the word I was looking for. Well, every person has it, right? And for some, it's
To an
a lot more
extent, you can hear
pronounced.
a color, or
I
yeah.
can, yeah. So I see shapes when I hear things. I see
Yeah.
geometries, and I see colors when I taste. So when I remember growing up, and my mom, you would taste something in the kitchen, it would give it to you on a spoon. Here, try this, and I would say, well, can't really decide what it needs, but it tastes a little bit. It needs a bit more purple, or it needs a bit more yellow, right? That was my language to communicate taste. I learned rather late, given that age span, that okay, it's actually salt that you talk, or it's pepper, or it's heat, or
Wow.
whatever. But it was so I have that when I played music instruments. Um, I used to play saxophone, which I in the
Yeah.
end, playing this after sort of we talked about rules when you break them, and of course I
Yeah.
learned classic music, right? We used to learn
Yeah.
piano, and I was never good in just reading the sheets. That was just mentally. It was in a creative manner with the fingers, and when I started playing saxophone, I just refused to play something off the sheets. I just closed eyes, and I taught myself how to improvise, basically, right? But in order to memorize or to recall these sort of that train of improvisation I want to play now, I actually saved that in my head into shapes, and then I would
Mhm.
just recall that shape and would play after that shape, and that would
Mhm.
create a theme. It's never the same, but it's a theme. So yes, I have the stuff. Far too much.
You've got it, man, on steroids. That's
I'm just
amazing.
having it on steroids, exactly. So even nowadays, it's just yeah. Okay, great.
All right, so I'll
What's
go
your
next. And I'll need to jump in a few minutes here, so we may not get through all
last
of them,
one?
but that's okay. That's all
I'll
right.
do the last one. I'll pick my last one too here.
Okay.
Go for it.
So this one's called "The Symbolic Power of Small Gestures."
Yes, right on.
A tiny act can signal change, early change. It's said that Satya Nadella, when he became CEO of Microsoft, he handed every leader at the company a copy of a book called Nonviolent Communication. He was signaling
Right,
something. He's like, we're
right,
not going to
right,
be Ballmer, the guy that had
right,
preceded,
right, right, right.
who was
Who is
anything
fun to
but
watch?
nonviolent communication. He was like,
Go and watch his YouTube rants about the iPhone and stuff. I love this.
you remember there was a famous one. I think if you just Google Ballmer Monkey Hop or Monkey Man, it's a famous conference from like 2000 where he's screaming into the microphone, I love this
Yeah.
company.
Exactly.
And then
Yes.
he's
Yeah.
jumping like a
Yeah.
maniac on stage. He literally twists his knee. He like tears his ACL on stage.
Well, what did you expect? Yeah, that's right. I remember that. This is hilarious. Watch this, and then right afterwards, watch the Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone. It's just these polar opposites
Oh my God.
of
Yes.
company culture in the same
Yes.
technological
Side by
space. I
side.
just
Crazy.
love
Right.
those. Yeah.
But
All right.
I do think small gestures are powerful, and just
Yeah.
something I did recently that I think made a big dent. I gave some books. I went to that Innovation Leader Conference in Boston. There was authors there signing books, and I thought, why don't I just give these books to my client? And so I had every author sign the book to the CEO and wish him well and best wishes on the innovation journey. And I mailed those to his house. I think that gained a
Oh,
lot of mileage.
right. Right on.
He really
Yeah.
appreciated that.
That's also you mailed it to his house. That's an analog
I
experience
mailed it
right
to him.
there. Right
Yeah,
on.
handwritten
Right
letter,
on.
like, I'm really looking forward to doing this innovation journey with you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. I think that's great. I think also the rediscovering the power of mailing physical stuff to people.
Yes.
When I when I go on trips with my parents or go meet them somewhere, right? And I learned that the way these people, this generation, right? I could send them all these photos on photo streams and whatnot, and here and there,
Mm.
and all digital, but they don't look at photos in a digital manner, right? They don't have the iPad all the time around. But what they do after dinner,
Yeah.
and there's a customer insight here then for me, they sit around, pull out the photos, and just hand them over, right? The analog, a physical photo. And so what I do now when we wrap up trips, before they
Yeah.
reach home, there already is ideally or shortly after they get a stack of photos at this normal size, 13 centimeters by 8. And they're so happy with this because this is how they access the stuff, right? And these photos, they get lost and then they get pinned up here and there. And when I travel home, I see these photos like worn out by finger fat and just like pinholes, right? Like pinning them on the wall. So I'm like, this is right. The stuff is used. So yeah. Okay, last one on my side. I'm figuring what to pick the last one. I think I'll pick a very human one. So every designer should know what to refuse to do even for money. And I think it goes simply back to something, being a designer, everybody, right? Something very human. I help a lot of people sort of coach and manage career transitions and how to exit, when to exit gracefully. Knowing when to say no, and I think comes down to don't go or don't stay where you're not treated well, where you're not supported, right? Where something fundamentally isn't right for you. And no matter the money, you're just not going to be whole as a person. And I think for creatives, this matters. It matters for everybody. I had that in my last career situation. I'm like, just don't stay where it's not for you, right? And not for you can be many things: time, your development versus what they need, people, but leave circumstances that don't suit you because you're not getting better, no matter how much money you get.
There's an expression that consultants use. Sometimes you have to fire a client, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Right on.
Something
that's a
noticing
great...
is that speaking of small details and gestures, we've been on this call for about an hour and a half. And
almost.
you are now, your face is now cast in shadow, but there is a beautiful sunlit side of like clearly the sun is coming up where you live and it's gone down where I live.
Right. I'm trying to duck behind the monitor here to get the sun out of my face.
I see a beautiful day arising. Where are you, in Thailand?
In Thailand, Chiang Mai. It's an absolute blessed place. It's amazing. It's a very spiritual center.
So enjoy your gorgeous day in Thailand. It looks like a sunny day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Curtis. This was great fun. I loved our innovation bantering and in general deep dives on this stuff. We'll get back together on this, I'm sure. And thank you for your time, your energy, your great questions or statements. I still call them questions. And I hope to have you again sometime soon.
Thanks. I hope to see you someday in Thailand. That would be nice.
That would be awesome. All right. We're going to innovate here. Okay. Have a good rest of your night, and I'm going to start my day. Thank you, Curtis. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. That's it for this episode with Curtis. I always enjoyed talking to Curtis. We get along nicely. We always flow and fall from one topic to another, as they're also often linked, of course. And on this episode, we explored how to build innovation capacity, the power of facilitation that goes along with the capacity, using AI to catalyze, not shortcut, creative work, and what it means to lead change from within in an organization. And trust me, it's the hardest thing to do, changing organizations. If this sparked something, let me know. I always want to hear your thoughts, your take, follow-up questions. I will link to all of the mentioned in this episode in the show notes, as well as the newsletter. And if you want to get in touch with me in the show, designofficehours@peterbuckle.com. Email goes there. And on Instagram, follow me on @designofficehours. I hope to see you all in the next episode. Until then, take care.